One of the biggest sale weekends of the year is fast approaching. Labor Day weekend is traditionally filled with retail discounts ahead of the federal holiday. But this year, Labor Day sales will be happening in the midst of an ongoing pandemic, inflation, and supply chain disruptions. That combination could lead to less than impressive discounts. Meanwhile, supply chain disruptions can be seen in multiple sectors. Canadian tech companies predict it will be months at least until their supply chain processes are back to normal. And they warn that it would take even longer to make up for lost profits and elevated costs from a string of recent issues. Well, joining us now to talk more on the supply chain disruptions during the pandemic is Brendan Caldwell, Director of Caldwell Securities Limited. Brendan, always great having you on Forum Daily. Welcome back.
Thank you, Nima. Great to be here.
So why are we having a shortage in certain products, Brendan?
Well, the supply chain, the ability for products to get delivered from where they're made to where they're needed has been really fundamentally disrupted, not just from COVID, but trade wars between the US and China. See, going back however long you want to go, products used to be made locally. I mean, most Canadian towns had a piano manufacturer. Now there are two piano manufacturers on the face of the earth. There were all kinds of little car companies. Now there's only a handful of car companies on the face of the earth. So things were made locally, then they were made nationally. Now they're made transnationally. And that interconnectedness, the globalization which you and I have grown up with, has been increasingly a part of how goods get from where they're made to where they're wanted. And that has been really turned upside down by not just COVID, although COVID's been a big part of it, but increased demand and the ability, the actual physical ability to get from one place to the other. That's been it's been a real challenge.
And how has the pandemic itself impacted supply chains within Canada, Brendan?
Well, it's not so much within Canada, although the barriers between provincial borders is another thing for another conversation. It's more overseas to Canada, particularly coming from Asia. COVID has disrupted China in a major way, which has a pretty much zero tolerance policy for COVID. And notwithstanding that's where the virus originally came from, one single case in a major port is enough to have it shut down for weeks. And given how much has come from China, not just computer chips, not just running shoes, but everything has got some part coming from there. That's what's really disrupted it. And what that means is a container that would have contained Chinese running shoes or computer chips or whatever is now not available in Iowa to load soybeans, so that soybean shipment doesn't make it to Indonesia, so that there isn't the animal feed available. So everything is interconnected, and when one part of the chain breaks, the whole thing is, if not falling apart, at least disrupted very badly.
All right, Brendan, just about 2 minutes left here, but what kind of products have been impacted due to supply shortages right now?
Well, the single biggest one has been computer chips, because we think of computer chips, and it's not just the really high-end chips that do brilliant graphic design. For enough money, those very few really high-end chips can always get from one place to another. But so much of our world is now computerized. A 1957 Chev didn't have any computer chips in it. Indeed, the first mission to the moon didn't have computer chips, it had transistors. So flash forward to the present, your car now has lots of computer chips to run everything, the brakes, the air conditioning, everything. So the big car companies in the US have been stockpiling their cars, which look ready, except there's no brakes because there's no chip to run them. So that would be the biggest thing. And that's been caused partly by COVID, partly by the cryptocurrency. The demand for computer chips, particularly graphics processing units, GPUs, has been tremendous. So that's going to need to get itself sorted out.
That's very interesting, Brendan. Now, is this a permanent issue, or do you see supply chains picking back up soon?
I think we need to think about it in permanent terms and think about how our world interacts. If there was a single book to read that is but is not about this subject, it's called The Long Summer by Brian Fagan. And it's about how, as societies get bigger and more complex and more interdependent, they're able to withstand bigger and bigger climactic shifts. And what we've seen, though, is that over the millennia, as bigger and bigger shocks hit those interconnected economies, they're more susceptible to falling apart. And what I think we need to have a pay attention to as a society, as a civilization, is how our interconnectedness is not just related to computer chips and running shoes, but fundamental resources like food. I think it's going to be an ongoing issue for a long time that we're going to have to, in a considerate, non-combative way, if we're going to get through this, work on it as a society together.